You know, something I wish I realized before I made my Heir to the Empire review are that there are literally comic book adaptations of all 3 books that I could have used as visual representations of the story. I mentioned that in my first review, but I thought it was a side adaptation instead of adapting the whole book. So thankfully, showing stuff on screen from now on is going to be easier. Especially now that I can just look at these comic books for reference whenever I need to remind myself of what happened. So with that being said, let's get on with the damn review. Dark Force Rising is the second entry of the Thrawn Trilogy, published a year after Heir to the Empire. I want to say firsthand that the Thrawn Trilogy are meant to be set back to back rather than a time jump, but given these books absolutely earn their cliffhangers, like Republic Commando, it's not an issue. So of course, this book picks up where we left off, after Grand Admiral Thrawn's attack on the New Republic and Admiral Ackbar accused of treason. And I forgot to say this in the Heir to the Empire review, but it's nice that Admiral Ackbar isn't killed off like a little bitch. Also, something I find interesting in this trilogy in general is how perspectives are done. So far, the story is done more distantly between characters, as I don't recall the main heroes directly meeting the main villains so far in this 3-part story at all. Sure, there is a part where Leia and Thrawn almost meet, but we'll get to that. Talon Karrde and his gang are fleeing from their base on Merkur. One little nitpick I have is that Heir to the Empire paid a little more attention to all of Karrde's henchmen, but in this book, it mostly felt like it was just Talon Karrde and Mara Jade and maybe give Karrde's other henchmen a few lines here and then. It doesn't ruin the story, it's just something I pointed out. Now I wanted to talk about the namesake of the middle chapter, the titular Dark Force Rising. From what I understand of listening to the story, it's referring to the Katana fleet, and this is where continuity starts becoming very iffy. The Clone Wars and specific dates are referred more to in this book. The Katana fleet is a task force of 200 Dreadnought-class heavy cruisers launched by the Republic. Apparently, the story goes that the fleet went missing before the Clone Wars, and it has extremely valuable equipment and stuff on board that could win either side the Galactic Civil War. The fleet included AT-PTs, which were featured in a few prequel-era stories, so it wasn't like they weren't trying to make everything fit. Although you can clearly tell that Timothy Zahn still had a completely different idea of what the Clone Wars was. This story felt like a lot of the characters who were introduced had more pivotal roles. Every notable character from Heir to the Empire are important to the story and are reactive to what they do with each other. It's almost like they're all the protagonists, yet it manages to be not messy is how I'll describe it. See, Plinkett? A story doesn't need one main character to be good, even though Qui-Gon was and always will be the main character. Lando in this chapter is also with Luke. We get a confrontation with some random new character named Niles Ferrier, who is trying to steal New Republic ships for Grand Admiral Thrawn. Luke and Lando confront him and talk him into not doing that. I don't really see a larger point to all of this, given Niles doesn't really show up for the rest of the book in general, aside from showing up later to leak Thrawn's name to Han and Lando and an ambush. Given Admiral Ackbar is being framed as a traitor given Imperial funds entered his bank account the same time the shipyard was attacked in the last book, it makes him a suspect. The main dude trying to convict Admiral Ackbar is a Bothan named Borsk Failure, and damn did they do a good job of making this guy a sleazy opportunist. Now after this, the main cutoff between the characters happens again. Luke does his research on Joruus C'baoth. He's documented as a Jedi who went missing on the outbound flight project into the unknown regions, which is the kind of mystery I wish the sequel trilogy had, given J.J. Abrams came up with the crappiest mysteries ever that he had no resolution for. He just relied on the audience to come up with their own. In the last book, C'baoth actually called out to Luke, and now Luke is trying to seek him out. Let me say that the intrigue surrounding Joruus C'baoth is a great mystery, and certainly better than the crap J.J. Abrams tried to pull with the sequel trilogy. The mystery here is used to tell the story rather than postpone it. Leia in the last book wanted to speak to the Noghri Kabarak, who tried to kill her, but stopped at the last minute when he recognized Darth Vader's scent in her, to try and help the Noghri people, given she found out the Empire is exploiting their people. At first I thought the Noghri was supposed to be the unique henchmen of Grand Admiral Thrawn, and most of their development would be as villains, but this book subverted my expectations and humanized the Noghri, revealing their standards to be akin to those of other alien cultures, like Wookiees for example. I'm going to also say that this novel certainly utilizes its length to its full advantage. This is probably the most developed story out of all the Star Wars novels I've read so far. Darth Plagueis was sort of an expansion on the Sith and certain key characters, but Heir to the Empire and especially Dark Force Rising are very expansive on the Star Wars universe, increasing my thirst for knowledge on the universe. This book is also sort of like a trivia piece, giving me more facts about the universe than crappy lore channels like Star Wars Explained could ever hope to tell. Anyhow, we cut back to Talon Karrde and Mara Jade, who have escaped the Empire, and we have Karrde elaborate on how he accidentally discovered the Katana fleet years ago. Then Mara Jade is sent out by Karrde to go set up a stronger network signal or something. It's just set up for an ambush where a bounty hunter confronts Mara and, well, Mara kills him when she uses the Force to cause a distraction. Now, something I probably should have talked about more is Mara Jade's character. Like, I discussed her role in that she hates Luke Skywalker, but I wanted to discuss who she is. Well, basically, Mara Jade is a Ranger.
Did you have souls?
Alright, in Australia, Ranger is essentially a slur for people with red hair. I often make jokes like this whenever I come across a fictional character with red hair. Cal Kestis was one, and now we have Mara Jade. So to be serious, Mara Jade doesn't have that complex of a personality. I find characters who are constantly bitter, angry, and annoyed to not be very interesting. I guess it's sort of relatable since I have a pessimistic outlook on life, but I don't like reading other characters who are like this. Since there's like a zillion other stories with Mara Jade in it, I'll reserve final judgment, and I'll see how she evolves throughout the expanded universe. But for now, she's basically some sassy woman like, say, Bastila Shan was when the player first meets her in Knights of the Old Republic. Although in KOTOR, Bastila's dialogue was way more interesting and sort of witty at times. Mara Jade always felt like someone who just hates life, and she does improve a bit later in the story, but I'll get to that. Anyways, we cut to Thrawn, who's basically giving the audience context in, you know, Thrawn and the Imperials kind of serve that purpose sometimes, to discuss what the bad guys are doing at whatever point in the story. It's not an issue, because this happens all the time in stories, and they progress the story with Thrawn going to Honagar to talk to the Noghri. So next we see Leia and Chewie taking the gamble to try and help C'baoth and his people by going to Endor. I didn't mention this in the previous review, but meeting C'baoth on Endor seemed a little fan-servicey. But there's no Ewoks in the story, so that's the redeeming quality. On Han and Lando's side, it's here where we get set up to meet a famous expanded universe character that makes his first appearance in this story. Basically, Han decides to tail one of Thalia's aides before being stopped by a middle-aged woman, Irene's, telling him to come with her. Next we've got Luke Skywalker, in a bar, settle a dispute between two dudes with a disagreement. This part is probably the closest to being filler, and I think it's meant to demonstrate the Jedi disputes everything idea the expanded universe has. I mean, that's what Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon did at the very beginning of The Phantom Menace, but still, there's little plot relevance here. I think it was just here to fill in the story, but given the story's long enough and this is such a small part, I don't know why this was thrown in. So basically Lando comes in and tells Luke what's going on with Han, which I wish the Luke scene just started with that, and on top of that, the Empire's shown up and they've seized both the Lady Luck, Lando's ship, and Luke's X-Wing. So the crew basically hurry it out of there, with Luke chopping off R2's restraining bolt, which kinda reminds me of that dumb criticism some people make about that one part of Attack of the Clones, where Anakin cuts the poisonous worms, and they think Anakin would have killed Padme. So Irene wants Han Solo to come to her base, and mentions it's someone that Han's met before. Of course, it isn't revealed who it is just yet. Luke doesn't accompany them. Instead, he decides to head to Jomark to go meet Joruus C'baoth. So, back to Leia, who finally gets in contact with C'baoth, and since she agreed to meet C'baoth alone for the most part, she tells Chewie to stay on the Falcon. Of course, Chewie objects, but Leia decides to take the risk. So they're gonna fly in C'baoth's ship to Honagar, where, just their luck, there's an Imperial Star Destroyer there, the Chimera, Thrawn's ship. Of course, it seems at first that C'baoth had lured them into a trap, but C'baoth insists he did not rat them out, and that he didn't know the Star Destroyer would be there. Of course, Chewbacca doesn't listen, and tries to strangle C'baoth, who knocks him out with a stun weapon. I gotta say that in the novel, it's a pretty high tension scene. C'baoth has to calm Leia down, as well as respond to the Chimera. Thrawn, being who he is, thinking 5 steps ahead, points out that he sent C'baoth to kidnap Leia in the first place, and being the sole survivor, he's getting suspicious of something, and believes C'baoth is hiding something, given he was late to reply and was acting like he was trying to avoid them. Of course, it's not enough information to put 2 and 2 together, but Thrawn is of course thinking ahead, like he always is. The Noghri agree to protect Leia, whom they all refer to as Lady Vader. Something that I want to point out is that I haven't really seen any part of the story where Leia hides from Thrawn more discreetly. And they add in a detail where they're going to hide Leia from all the heat detection by going into a hut that's naturally filled with heat, while Thrawn goes to speak to C'baoth. Thrawn, already suspicious, asks C'baoth what he did after he failed to capture Leia, and the exchange has C'baoth fabricate stuff. Thrawn, as always, is cold in how he stares into people's stalls. Meanwhile, we've got Han and Lando and the Lady Luck following both Irene's and another woman, Cena, into an old deserted rebel base. No, it isn't Crate. That would be too salty for my liking. Well, basically, it's finally revealed here who their leader is. It's Garm Bel Iblis. You all remember him for his cameo in The Force Unleashed, right? Han Solo recognizes Garm Bel Iblis as he's the Senator of Corellia, which of course is Han's homeworld. It's shown that Han idolizes Garm Bel Iblis from when he was Corellia's representative in the Imperial Senate, before Palpatine shut them down and told them to fuck off. Given my only experience with the character was The Force Unleashed and Empire at War Forces of Corruption, I didn't get a lot of characterization for who Garm Bel Iblis is. I think Garm Bel Iblis is quite an undershadowed character. He does feel like the sort of character that would have been in the prequel trilogy in a minor role at least, like maybe in that deleted scene where they suggest a rebellion. They have Garm Bel Iblis, who I'm just gonna call Iblis because I'm sick of saying his full name. But anyways, I have to wonder why Iblis wasn't in the prequel trilogy at all from a story perspective. Like, obviously George Lucas's prequels were something different from the Thrawn Trilogy, but I got the feeling that having Iblis as a background character wouldn't break anything in his trilogy. One thing I wanted to talk about is how Dark Force Rising establishes Iblis as a founding father of the rebellion, but when discussing that specific moment, continuity-wise, it's rather strange that Starkiller nor Ram Koda were mentioned. Like, obviously the characters didn't exist back then, but still they sprung to mind instantly when they were talking about the origins of the rebellion. It's iffy continuity, to be honest. It makes me wonder whether or not Starkiller and Ram Koda were hammed in, but it's nowhere as inconsistent as someone like Ahsoka. Ahsoka will always be the black sheep of hammed in retcons. Anyhow, we cut back to Thrawn and the Imperials, and this scene shows up that they are one step closer to obtaining the katana fleet. I do have to say that I didn't find much new out of these scenes. Like, at the start of the Thrawn Trilogy, I liked how Pellaeon and Thrawn played off of each other when expressing themselves, and Pellaeon was the sort of guy who constantly says, "wow," to whatever Thrawn does and constantly be impressed by him. While the characterization of Thrawn stays consistent, I gotta say that it's becoming quite predictable that Thrawn is always going to detect something outside the box. and it feels as if he does it in the exact same way. Like, he talks to Pelion about whatever, and basically with him, puts 2 and 2 together and connect dots and whatnot, and it's getting repetitive at this point. Cut back to Leia, who is speaking to the Noghri matriarch about the backstory of the Noghri. Essentially, Leia is dead set on helping the Noghri, and in turn, turning Imperial assets into New Republic ones. I do like that Leia isn't just some Mary Sue that helps for the sake of helping, but she has motives outside of helping, even if she genuinely wants to help. Like, what I mean by that is that she does want to help the Noghri, but it's also because she needs new allies too, because the Republic desperately needs them. Like, it's akin to when Leia was involved with politics in the Imperial Senate, so it's a good callback to that stuff in A New Hope. So far from Leia's understanding of the events, the Rebels did this, and later it's revealed that the poisoning of Honogga dates back to the Clone Wars, but I'll get to that. I also wanted to point out how Leia isn't that bothered about constantly being referred to as Lady Vader. She hated her biological father for many reasons. First, because he was a tyrant's enforcer, and second, because he tortured her and watched on as Tarkin blew up Alderaan. I have heard that there is a storyline where Kitster, Anakin's childhood friend from the Phantom Menace, spoke to both Leia and Han Solo, and shared his experience with Anakin, which is what made Leia forgive her father, and is what inspired her to name her third child after Anakin. Like, obviously she can't back down from being called that, because she needs that leverage to help the Noghri, but still, I would have liked to see some resentment. To be honest, Leia isn't very snarky at all in the story. It's kinda strange. Then Thrawn shows up uninvited, rude, and Leia and Chewie and 3PO have to go hide somewhere. I was actually wondering whether or not Leia would actually get caught or not. It's painfully slow in an effective way, and it's a relief when Thrawn finally does leave. Phew, Leia must have been thinking. I did get the impression that them not being caught was kinda lucky, but it didn't feel contrived. Next, we finally got Luke Skywalker go meet Joruus C'baoth. I recall while listening to the audiobook that Joruus C'baoth behaved strangely and erratically. I'm going to point out that Joruus C'baoth had interactions with Thrawn in the Imperials, but given this part of the story is from Luke's perspective, you really get the full feeling of how weird Joruus C'baoth is. Of course, I'm guessing that the clone plot twist will happen in The Last Command, but I still am ultra curious on how it will happen. I have a good feeling even if I did not look briefly at the Wikipedia article. I still would have been wondering, what the hell is up with this dude? Maybe the clone plot twist would have crossed my mind, but still. I'll discuss this more in The Last Command. Anyways, Luke slowly finds out that Joruus C'baoth is kinda insane, and this is exemplified when there's a confrontation between two people, and C'baoth responds by using Force Lightning, stunning the aggressor. Luke tries to point out to him that there were other ways of stopping him, and C'baoth just tells him that shocking him with lightning would be the only way he would remember, and that a slap on the wrist wouldn't be enough. This is what causes Luke to return to the X-Wing and talk to R2 about how strange Joruus C'baoth is. He knows just by meeting him that something's not right. Cut back to Han and Lando talking to Garm Bel Iblis. It's established here that Iblis did not join the mainstream rebellion, and decided to wage war independently from Mon Mothma. In a way, he's like Saw Gerrera, but unlike Saw, he wasn't a bloodthirsty, violent terrorist. To someone who only plays the games, you'd probably see Garm Bel Iblis and wonder why he wasn't in the original trilogy. Well, this is why. After talking with Iblis, Lando gets extremely suspicious. He points out to Han as they're going to their arranged quarters that Iblis says they move around a lot, yet the camp's not in a packing state. It's closer to being a permanent base. Also, when they get to their quarters, Lando realizes the chairs are colored the same as the Katana fleet. I don't recall Lando being this perceptive, so either he's become more cautious since Return of the Jedi, or this is slightly off writing. I'm not sure. I noticed that in these books, the characters seem to notice or point out things I wouldn't expect them to. The look of Iblis's base seems extremely specific, and doesn't seem like something anyone, unless they were extremely bored in-universe, would pick up on. Anyhow, they decide to snoop around. and they get caught. This leads to both of Iblis's lieutenants bringing them to Iblis, and Iblis explains that he wants them to be an informant when it comes to Mon Mothma, given Mothma and Iblis have had their disagreements when they split off in the rebellion. Cut back to Thrawn and the Imperials. Thrawn discusses how they've captured one of Talon Karrde's freighters, which leads to Mara Jade being brought aboard above Endor. Contrary to what she previously believed, it turns out Thrawn does actually know about her previous role as one of the Emperor's hands. Of course, Mara Jade isn't interested in rejoining what's left of the Empire. And of course, she learns that she was not the only Emperor's hand. She was one of several, much to her shock. Thrawn wants the location of the Katana fleet, and she's forced to go to Talon Karrde, find out where it is and come back. And that's the end of the chapter. I guess this characterizes Mara Jade as sticking to her current allegiance. Something I did wonder is what an Emperor's hand did and what Palpatine taught them. I would have thought Palpatine would have reflected his evil mindset onto all of his hands. Point being that I was kind of expecting Mara Jade to be at least a bit shallow as a person. Anyways, there's a part with Leia and Chewie, but it's basically more talk about helping the Noghri. I've discussed it already. Next, we've got Han and Leia be distracted by Niles Ferrier, and as I said, he leaks Thrawn's name to the duo. And after some banter, the duo leaves. Now, keep in mind, I'm trying to describe the book as accurately as I can, but since the novels are so damn long, I struggle to remember everything. But I know this is more build up to the Katana fleet. Anyways, enough with my confusion there. Mara Jade goes over to Talon Karrde to get the information she needs for Thrawn, but oh Thrawn, you backstabber. Turns out he was just setting a trap for both of them. I love how unapologetic he is when Mara is angry at him for breaking their deal. Of course, Mara tries to attack Thrawn, and Rook grabs her before she can harm the Grand Admiral. So when Mara pretends to be submissive to the Empire, Thrawn lets her go, and she uses the passcode she has as an Emperor's hand to get Joruus C'baoth's info, which Thrawn mentioned during he and Mara's conversation. Getting the location, she escapes from the Chimera. So what does this lead to? Mara Jade goes to confront both Joruus C'baoth and Luke Skywalker, who is still on Jomark. Why? Because she needs Luke Skywalker's help, and so, because Joruus C'baoth is a crazy old man, after trying to convince R2 she's here to help, she speaks to Luke and requests his help with the classic jailbreak. I could tell she really did not want to ask Luke this, because she still hates his guts. And Joruus C'baoth attacks the duo, but R2 stuns him with a shot from the X-Wing. And Luke, given he's written by someone who isn't Rian Johnson, insists they leave him unconscious because he doesn't believe in killing like that. So the prison break commences, and it involves Mara Jade's passcode knowledge and disguises, and it somewhat reminded me of A New Hope, honestly. And given Luke is the one who directly frees Talon Karrde, that made for an interesting exchange given Luke was previously kidnapped by him, but now they've got bigger problems. They have a long drawn out escape from the Empire, and I'll just summarize by saying this. It's a very bantery jailbreak, with constant communication and quips from the characters. I mean, I said it in the last review that Talon Karrde is basically what Han might have been if he didn't join the rebellion. So with that being said, it's revealed to Leia after a long time of talking that the devastation of Honagar was not the rebels' fault because it happened during the Clone Wars. The matriarch said it happened around 44 years ago, which I thought was way off and was gonna criticize it, but then a buddy pointed out to me that she was probably speaking about the dating system on her planet, so it was actually accurate. From a certain point of view, I guess that's true. So that still means the prequels and the Thrawn Trilogy do not contradict each other. Yet. The following scene has Leia openly speak to the Noghri people, trying to convince them that the Empire has continued to poison their world. The explanation is kinda elaborate, and I honestly lost track. It was a discussion about a plant that the Empire kept synthetically poisoning that is able to make the Noghri realize they've been tricked by the Empire. Next, we've got Niles Ferrier ambush Han and Lando, but they survive and manage to make it back to the New Republic. Here, all the heroes decide to have a meeting, where Karrde discusses where the Katana fleet is, and to make a long story short, the heroes arrive at the Katana fleet, but you know who else wants it? And they show up and a big battle ensues, with the aftermath being that the Imperial forces have captured most of the Katana fleet, with the Katana fleet holding a batch of clones. And since this is where the story ends on another cliffhanger, by the end I was losing track, given the prequel trilogy exists. There's some huge gaps to fill, because they're adding clones to the story and it's making it kinda convoluted. I was completely lost by the end. In the comic, the clones look nothing like Jango Fett, so it's obviously not his template. I think this is where the story lost me. There's of course a lot of setups for The Last Command, as Joruus C'baoth argues with Thrawn, and Thrawn seemingly having advantage over the New Republic by attaining the Katana fleet. I hope this is all cleared up in The Last Command, because the ending rather confused the hell out of me. So on with the final verdict. Aside from the ending, this was a solid sequel to Heir to the Empire. Although now that I think about it, Heir to the Empire is the better book. It's better structured, easier to keep track of, and is more engaging. Dark Force Rising was a solid read, or listen in my case, but I kinda did have to go read the comic book adaptation for visual reminders. I would recommend you read the books before the comics, as the comics are sort of like the by the beats adaptations. I'm proud to give Dark Force Rising an 8 out of 10. Maybe if I read it before the prequels, it would be less confusing, but still. I still don't think it contradicts the prequels per se. I just mean that it's going to take one hell of a story to patch my confusion up. Maybe there should be a special edition version, like I suggested, to clear things up. So there's my review of Dark Force Rising. Geez, this was longer than I expected it to write. But now that's behind me. I'm JJ Plagiarisms. And until next time, what are stories but mystery boxes?
We found you hiding, we found you lying, choking on the dirt and sand. Your former glories and all your stories, dragged and washed with eager hands.